Welcome, junior parents, to part one of our junior parent presentation. Tonight, the overall goal is to just generally frame for you what to expect between now through June, and then we'll follow up in the spring with some more detailed instructions when they become more relevant. So I'm Melissa Kinney. I'm a counselor for all grades with last names BR through DA.
And I'm Jennifer Otulasega. I'm a counselor with kids with the last names of A to BQ.
Okay, thanks so much for attending, and we're just going to dive in. So one of the first things that I like to share anytime we're talking about college admissions or post-secondary planning is that, one, we know it's a very stressful time. And there are tons of, I'm using air quotes when I say this, tons of experts out there. They could be friends, they could be people that work in admissions, they could be your own students' friends. Lots of people have lots of opinions on what the best possible things to do. And so I like to start by sharing some research on happiness, which is that right now it probably feels like 95% of your happiness as a parent and your child's happiness will completely hinge on getting into that one college, that one that everybody is focused on, that's different for every kid, and that it's only 5% of everything else. And obviously that's a joke, but I do want to share this data. There's a lot of research out there about happiness, and not the smiley face, hokey happiness, but what makes us live happy and fulfilled lives. There's research coming from Harvard and Stanford, University of Pennsylvania. There's lots of robust research out there. And so I like to share this at the start. 50% of our baseline happiness is our biology. Just, what our genetic makeup is like and how it makes us interact with the world. 40% of it is our intentional activity, which is a huge chunk. So what we focus on, what we do with ourselves, how we occupy our time, how we occupy our minds. And then 10% is our life circumstances. So these after high school outcomes, what jobs we get, all the external factors matter less than what society tells us. So it's not the car, it's not necessarily the job. It is income up to a certain point, but that income is a much lower threshold than we might think. But really it's 40% what we tell ourselves and how we function in the world. So when we go through this process, always keep that in mind. This outcome really is only going to dictate 10% of your child's lifelong happiness. Again, more framing. When we go through this process, it can feel like you are at the end of the whip, like you are just being led around by these college admissions officers or this process. But remember, you are ultimately the consumer, and your child, and therefore, any tuition money you have, that's ultimately the real commodity. One thing that we know as counselors is that students can get really bogged down and stressed throughout this process. Some shut down, some power through, some, pretend like everything's fine and then shut down later. Really what they're going to need your help in, parents, is seeing the big picture. So seeing the big picture when they get bogged down in the minutia, in the stress. Another great thing to do is to point out the risks of continually moving the goalposts in life and delaying happiness. So I think we've all had that experience as adults where we thought, okay, when I get this job, then I'll be happy. When I, meet this other external benchmark, then I'll be able to relax and be happy. And the trick is that we're always moving that goalpost. And the happiness never lasts that long. And that's what the research bears out. So always help your child understand where maybe they're externalizing their happiness a little bit too much. Help them maintain their confidence. If there's a time their confidence is going to get shaken, it's this post-high school outcomes process. And help them have a positive mindset. We know that you guys can do this, and we are definitely here to help. Another framing, I did a quick count. There are roughly 84, 85 Saturdays between now and the time they graduate. So savor them. It really can get easy to say, what are you doing? How are you in the process? What have you done? Why aren't you doing this? Really, the coaching and the savoring of that time is going to be a more enjoyable way to experience this process with them. Okay, so you guys are in 11th grade now. You guys have 11th graders. We've gone through the 6th and 8th grade process, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th. There's one more to go after this. And it's really impressive. And I hope you guys feel good that you made it this far as parents. So we're going to talk a little bit about what this 11th grade year, the benchmarks are. And so in our minds, it's working, investigating, and demonstrating. So when we think about junior year, when we think about working, we're really working on in-school grades. There's no magic trick. It's not the thing that everybody wants to know to focus on, but it's the thing that we need to focus on. Students need to be working on their in-school grades. They need to be working on test prep if it's available to them and they need it. That could be, we'll get into a little bit of test prep later. It could be something as simple as just self-work. It could be Khan Academy. They should be working on their skill development. If they're artists or musicians and they think they're going to go into that later, they should be working on their skills. If they're going into a technical field or they're at OTech and they want to work in that field later, they should be developing those skills. And they should be doing their extracurriculars in their sports and their jobs. They'll be investigating, looking into careers, looking into what their post-high school plans could be. If that involves college, they'll do college searching. If it involves potentially scholarships, scholarship searching. And then as we tie up the year, it ends up being the demonstrating. So you're demonstrating your performance in your transcripts and your test scores and your essays if you have to do them, your resumes, letters of recommendation, your future schedule. So I mean your senior year schedule. And you're also demonstrating interest in whatever post-secondary plans you have, be it a college or a technical field. So when we think about work, the overview, the basic work, we talked about in-school grades, test prep, skill development activities. So grades and rigor, really, again, no magic trick. You've got to focus on your in-school work. We want students to challenge themselves appropriately in their areas of strength. So you don't need to do all things well. You don't need to take every rigorous class we have. Maybe you take the rigorous classes in the areas of strength and interest that you have. You also need to seek help. This is a year where academically things become more complicated and they'll continue in senior year. So if you got along without getting a lot of help in 9th and 10th grade, this is the year where you might need to seek it. So grit is a great trait, and it's something that colleges are always really interested in hearing about. So it's a good time to get gritty, seek out the help. Test preparation. The best test prep is focusing on your in-school curriculum. Again, no magic trick. If your test scores, your SAT or ACT, which we'll get into a little bit later, aren't reflective of your in-school work, maybe look at your old standardized tests, your practice tests, your PSATs. If you've already taken one, look at those test performances and then work on your shortfalls. Skill development, again, talking about deepening your skills and demonstrating your interest. So if you're applying to an engineering school, are you taking the right math classes? If you're going into a trade, are you at OTech or are you considering OTech senior year? Not all skill building needs to be done in school. So if you are looking at direct medical programs or a direct dental program or a compressed engineering program, maybe you're going to look at an internship outside of school that's completely separate from us, and that's great. Can't always fit it in a school day from 7:30 to 2:30 every day, so it might need some outside of school work. Finally, your activities, your clubs and your sports and your jobs. We want you guys just to keep doing what you love. Try something new if what you love is changing. And remember that your activities outside of school are just as great and just as important as anything that Rochester High School provides to you as well.
We're going to take a minute to talk about standardized test details. Here in Rochester, the state requires us to test juniors in April with what's called the Michigan Merit Exam, also known as the MME. The MME is comprised of the SAT, something called the ACT work keys, and the M-STEP. ACT work keys tests students' job skills in applied reading, writing, math, and essential skills. The scores are based on job profiles that could help employers hire, train, or develop. In all honesty, few programs ask for these scores. However, some professional trade programs can. The M-STEP, which is the third test of the series, measures students' knowledge in science and social studies. The testing is required to be done really for two reasons: to measure what students have learned in relation to Michigan's career and college ready learning standards. And it's also simply required under the state and federal law to ensure high quality education is being done. So although the SAT is given in school, the ACT is still a test that can be taken and submitted for college admittance. Either of these tests can be taken more than once at a cost to a family. However, if there's a financial need, please let the counselor know and we can give a fee waiver. These tests have been important for college admittance in the past, but also for something called a merit scholarship, which is done at the college level, and we'll talk more in detail about that later. There are different test prep options. Really, education at Rochester High School is going to be the most important. Another one is Khan, also known as Khan Academy. The College Board, which is the makers of the SAT, have worked directly with Khan Academy, and they've created really some linkage between the PSAT score and some diagnostic practice that can be done through Khan Academy's program. If the kids get into their College Board account, they can link directly towards that. There's also many test prep companies available. We don't endorse any specific company at all, but there are many that you can look into. When registering for the initial test here in April, the students don't need to do anything. We take them through the process of how to register them for the test. If they are looking to take it outside of the school day, they register directly through ACT site or through the SAT site. Next slide, please. This is a quick kind of graphic comparison between the two tests of ACT and SAT. There's much information available if you'd like to research in more detail, but to note simply, typically a student that does better in English, the ACT might be a better option for them, while a student that does better in math, the SAT might be a better option for them. Here's the reasoning behind. The ACT overall score roughly equates to about 1/4 of measuring the math performance on the test, while the SAT, about half of the final score measures the math performance. Please take a minute to look at the graphic. Thank you. Let's take a second to take a look at some data. This data is collected by MCAN, which stands for Michigan College Access Network, and it's of an impact map. From here, we take a look at Oakland County's degree attainment specific to Oakland County's data, and roughly 57% of adults aged 25 to 64 in Michigan have earned at least an associate's degree. This is data that was collected a couple of years ago, but it tends to carry a similar percentage year to year. Next slide, please. This is a pretty big graphic, so I want to talk it through with you. We're going to look at public data that's available on My School Data. This shows data from the class of 2015. This class was polled so that we can take a look at data over some time. Here we see the class of 2015 for Rochester Community Schools, and they've earned the following stats. 37% earned a bachelor's degree within 4 years. 1.74% earned a 2-year degree within 4 years. 0.08% earned a certificate within 4 years, and 0% a professional credential. So how does this really speak to us? This data is similar to the class of 2013, while when we add a couple of more years and we go 6 years out, the data increases a small amount. We won't know exactly what has caused this degree or credential attainment to be the numbers that they are. But what I feel like has taken place in our community is that we haven't looked at careers for all. For some time, there's been a devaluing of some careers, and simple supply and demand, we obviously see how this is making an impact. If you're somebody looking to get into become an electrician or even have an electrician do some work at your house, there are few of them, and their charging per hour can absolutely increase. So simple supply and demand comes into play. Obviously, there are many other factors. Life happens, financial obligations happen. Over time, they have families and other factors come into play. But what we'd really like to focus on and concentrate on is career options for all, taking a look on our skills, our interests, and our values, and really looking at the bigger picture of what success means. Next slide, please. So again, knowing our skills, interests, and talents while including thoughts on lifestyle, which includes income, travel, etc., which are all important in bringing together the big picture. But also, what are opportunities available? So this is something called Michigan Hot 50, and this is taking a look at job outlook for 2028. More than not, new careers and industries will be developed, and our kids need to have the professional skills to really adjust, be flexible, be curious, work as a team, and be able to work and live within this changing world. More so than not, I'm hearing words like flexibility and being curious to be some of the professional skills that our students need more than anything else. The main goal, we believe, is that our children, our students, that we want happiness for them, to see that there's a place in them for them in this world to contribute and to have financial stability. Next slide, please. Here we're going to talk about some tools that your child has access to at Rochester High School. The first one is Zello. This is a tool that we have that measures that they've really been starting to work with in 7th grade up until 12th grade. Counselors do a lesson with kids within Zello every year. It seems like it's not until junior year that the kids really see the full value of this program. This is an amazing program. The kids can dive really, really deep into this. The hour that we have with kids truly isn't enough for them to be able to spend the amount of time that they can have on this. So kids are encouraged to work within Zello at home as well. A new program that we have at Rochester High School is called AchieveWorks Personality, and it's a Myers-Briggs type indicator. So personality is one of the factors to take a look at when we're connecting ourselves to career. Within this AchieveWorks personality, there's short questions, which talks about which scenario fits you best, followed by level of interest in specific career zones. It gives a personality type with our skills and our blind spots, also known as weaknesses, career and college satisfiers, learning style, interpersonal negotiating skills, and suggested careers based off of career cluster. Within this profile, the kids are able to get a list of a variety of careers that aren't based on skill, they're simply based on a personality indicator. So when we're able to marry really Zello with this AchieveWorks personality program, the kids are able to get a wide range of careers that might be a good fit for them. Oftentimes they notice that there are duplicates. Really, there's a career within Zello and a career within AchieveWorks that are matching up. And it's typically, excites them. It gets them curious about how that might be a good match for them. AchieveWorks Personality, this program we are doing with our 10th graders. And again, as I said, it's a new program to Rochester High School. It is available to all students, however, and the access key for a Rochester High School student is listed right there for you. The last tool that we have is also new to Rochester Community Schools, and it's called Nepris. And this is a program that connects industry professionals to classroom content. It's being encouraged to be done in the classroom. However, students are able to get into their very own Nepris account and look at videos that line up with industry professionals as well. Next slide, please. When we take a look at this, we're really looking at a variety of career options. And I think over time, we're able to see that the previous push that I think existed within our community of four-year college for all is really coming to light. The kids have many, many options, many career options that we want to make sure that families feel good about pursuing, kids feel good about pursuing. There, of course, is immediate workforce, entering the workforce immediately as an option. That might be pharmacy tech, road construction, sales. We are finding that some places within eye clinics, within dentistry, offices are training people right within the office. We've even heard ads for Google, which are taking a look at Google University. So this might really be a time of shift where we're looking at training options after high school being much broader than what we had once thought of before. Military is an option. In order to follow through with this, we have local recruiters. Many come to our school, but if your child has interest in this, you can contact a local recruiter. They'll be happy to come speak to your child and to you. Skilled trades. So we have Oakland Schools Technical Campus, where some of our students who have kind of been identified early as having some interest in this area have started attending this program in their junior and potentially senior year. Students can also attend Oakland Schools Technical Campus for 1 year as well. But here are some other sites on here that would be helpful for your child and you to help navigate how to apply to a skilled trade professional program. We have workforce development site and also a Growing Pro site to help really guide them in that next step process. At the community college level, we have associate's degree programs and also certificate programs. Some example of that would be CAD, respiratory therapist, criminal justice, baking and pastry chef. The list is very long. We have a link on here to Oakland Community College as one example. You can click on certificates and see many different options there. We also have a 4-year college, which I think is typically what we think of when we're thinking of post-high school training, although we need to really expand our thought process. Bachelor's degrees start and finish in 4 years. It's built to be a 4-year program in most cases. We're finding that some of our students aren't finishing, obviously, within the 4 years. And to me, that really talks about career awareness, skill awareness, interest. It really focuses to me that we need to be spending more time on developing who we are, getting to know what we enjoy doing, getting to know what our skills are, and then moving on from there. Really having the focus be on career development and then finding the training program that goes with that versus automatically thinking of a Michigan State and what do I do to get there? And hey, I'm here. What program do I study now? So also to take note of when a student starts potentially at a community college and does courses at the community college that then transfers to the 4-year college and finishes with their bachelor's degree there. We want to be sure that students are taking classes at the community college that lead to what that final degree looks like at that university. And there's a program called Michigan Transfer Network. The link is here as well for you to take a look at. And again, we just want to make sure that kids are taking the specific classes needed to help get them to that bachelor's degree within that 4-year time span so that they are staying on track and really not wasting time and money. Next slide, please.
Okay. All right. So we're going to segue into talking about investigating your program fits. So we typically think about fit when we think about bachelor's degrees, 4-year institutions, but really these types of questions can be applied to all post-high school options. The first guiding question for investigating whether a program is going to fit your needs or not is, do you reasonably match the program's admissions profile? If we're thinking about 4-year colleges, they will typically publish what we call a freshman class profile, which will tell you what the middle 50 percentile is for GPA and test scores and things like that. So really, as a student and as a parent, if you're trying to determine if a school is a reach school or a reasonable school, just take a look at that freshman profile to determine if you're a match. If you're looking at a technical field, you want to make sure that you've made if there's any prerequisite requirements, that you've taken those as well. Cost needs to be at the top of the list for most of us. Can you afford this program? If you're not certain, you can ask probing questions like, what's the average financial award? What kind of debt do people come out of this program with? Community. So when we think about maybe potentially going away to a program or even being in a program locally, living at home, but still being on the grounds quite often or being with that community, one of the first things we want to share is that your safety and feeling valued there is important. So when you're there as a student or when you're there as a parent, do you feel like your child is safe? Do you feel like you are safe yourself? Do you feel like this is an environment that is going to support your learning, just in general? Size. That's definitely something we think of when we think of a 4-year institution, but that could also be with program. Is a program super teeny? Is it super big? Does this size feel restricting? Does it feel intimidating to be in a big place? Does it feel just right? Locations. So I think when I think about location, I often think about, students wanting to go away to college, but I also think about the military. So in the military, you'd have options of active duty, reserve, or National Guard. So when you're thinking about evaluating any program, are you close enough or far enough away from your existing home for your goals and your family's comfort? Programs, another really basic one. Do they have what you want to study? Do they have the thing that you want to continue in doing if it's a technical field? Also, do they have the supports that you need? Maybe you have a learning difference. Maybe you have a disability. Does the place, the program, the college, etc., do they have supports in place to make sure that you can thrive there? Another really important thing, if we circle back to the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the fact that you guys are really the assets. You guys are the commodity. Good questions are, what's your job placement rate? How about professional degree placement rates? So if you think you're going to go beyond a bachelor's degree, or you're going to go to advanced training, what kind of outcomes does that program have for you? So again, when we think about program fit, we'll talk a little bit about college now in terms of different ways to connect with colleges. So we have college admissions representatives come visit us at Rochester High School every fall. They sign up to come and talk to students face-to-face. Sometimes they may do a Zoom. You can sign up in the counseling office or on the counseling webpage. Sometimes students don't feel like there's a point in doing that because they know what needs to be known in their minds. But these are the representatives that will ultimately also be reading the applications. So I think making that face-to-face connection is always beneficial. Rochester Community Schools will hold a college night every fall in October, typically. That's a great place to get a big bang for your buck and visit a lot of programs, talk to military recruiters, talk to colleges, etc. College visits and tours. Definitely getting on campus or getting into a program, the environment is vital. Again, goes back to feeling like, do you have a sense of the community? Do you feel safe there? Do you feel like it's a place where you can learn? Typically for a college visit, you sign up online on the admissions webpage. We definitely encourage everybody to attend when school is in session. So if you try to go during summer or during a break, campuses don't feel the same. So it's great to see what the school looks like in this case when students are in session. And then there's often college open houses where you can just drop in as needed. But when you go to these things and you speak to these people and you attend these events, you should also be asking some relevant questions. So what's the average profile of admitted students look like? So you heard me talk earlier about the freshman class profile. Maybe you're going to a trade school or a different type of program. Those questions are still relevant. Do I look like the type of student academically, achievement-wise, skill-wise that you typically admit? So again, you're going to ask about programs and options based on your interests. So let's say you don't know what you want to study when you get to college. Are there enough options for you to feel like you can explore? Average financial aid packages and final yearly cost. Cost is going to be vital. I don't think we have to shy away from having that discussion. Make sure that the investment is going to be worth it in the end. If there's a big award financially in freshman year, what does it take to continue that award for all 4 years? You have to look long range when we're thinking about cost. Then there are just some basic questions you can ask just to get a sense for like, what's the community like? So what are the most popular subjects in classes? And then if you are lucky enough to get on that campus later, to try to take those just to kind of see what other kids are interested in. The other, and this sounds kind of esoteric, but fine tune your gut. So we're always processing information, whether it's our rational brain or our emotional body. We are processing tons of information. We can't always put our fingers on what it is what is leading us to have these feelings. So when you're there as a parent, I encourage you to feel these things yourself and ask your child these questions. How did you feel when you were on campus? Could you see yourself living here? Did you see yourself represented here? You know, does your gut say yes or no? I think we've all had those experiences where our gut has said a firm yes or a firm no. And I think it's okay to talk about in this context as well. So we'll talk a little bit about financial aid and scholarships. Financial aid and scholarships will become much more relevant in spring and really in the fall of senior year. So we don't want to bog you guys down with a ton of details. We'll talk about a lot of it during part 2. But FAFSA, it's a free application for federal student aid that will open up October 1st of your senior year. College scholarships will run concurrently with applications. So some colleges will have a separate application. Most of them now consider you when you're also applying. So there's not necessarily a separate application, but we'll talk more about that when it's more relevant. And then private scholarships. Those can be applied to year round. FastWeb is a great scholarship search engine. We also post them on our counseling page here at Rochester High. So those private scholarships can be onesie, twosie things, anywhere from $100 to thousands. So those can be applied to throughout high school, depending on their criteria. The big takeaways we want you guys to have for financial aid and scholarships is do your taxes this year and keep the documents handy for the FAFSA. Sometimes if you're having your taxes prepared, they can print out a form for you that allows you to fill out the FAFSA easier later. So just keep that in the back of your mind. We don't want sticker price to prevent students from considering a college and applying, but the final price will definitely be a factor. So the sticker price for a private institution might be super high, but they may have more aid than an average public institution. So don't be shocked by the sticker price, but stay shocked if it doesn't move and it's out of your price range, okay? All right, so one of the things that it gives kids and parents some anxiety is like, how is a college perceiving me? How do they evaluate me? And how does it all connect? So this is our attempt to try to make sense of it for you. So we'll start on the left. So the baseline thing is, does your academic record show promise of retention for 4 years of tuition? So meaning, are you going to stick around? Are you going to academically be able to stay here? And are we going to get 4 years of tuition out of this student? It sounds very business-like. Sometimes we think that that can be helpful because it can depersonalize it. It's, are you a good investment for this college? So how do they determine that? They're looking at our high school profile, which we'll talk about in a minute, in relation to your transcript and your GPA, your test scores, future schedule, meaning like when you're applying to college senior year, did you back off on the tough classes because you're a senior and you don't think they count? They'll also, if you're applying to an art program or a music school, they'll also be looking at portfolios and auditions and things. So they want to see that you can academically make it for 4 years. Once they've determined that, the next higher order question becomes, how involved will you be on our campus in order to contribute to the appeal of campus life? So are you going to be a vibrant community member? And how do they determine that? They look at your activities. So what clubs, sports, jobs, what volunteering, how committed were you to those things? Did you just bop around and do a million different things? Or did you, dabble and then commit to 1 or 2 things that you really liked and stay with them for a few years? And then, so you've reported your academics and your activities, but how does a college really round you out as a human being and confirm all of the data? They use things like your essays. Do you sound like a teenager? Are you being authentic? Sometimes there's a heavy hand of an adult, sometimes editing them, or students are trying to sound like they expect the college to sound them. Excuse me, they alter their writing to sound like what they perceive a college is looking for. We really want them to sound like their authentic selves. Colleges expect them to be 17 and 18-year-old young adults. They also use letters of recommendation. So if a college requires a letter of rec, and not many of our publics do, but many privates do, and U of M does, do these letters of rec confirm what we're seeing academically, activity-wise, and in the essays? And then beyond that, there will sometimes be unique factors at play that colleges will consider. So for some colleges, they want to see demonstrated interest. Did you visit campus? Did you attend any of our events? Do you have any alumni from our college in your family? Did you encounter any authentic hardships? Not all of us would be lucky enough to have major wealth, but that can be a factor sometimes in higher order admissions. And do you have a special skill? Sometimes it's an orchestra is looking for a very specific instrument. Do you have that skill that college needs? Now, those things are rare, but they can be factors. So they're trying to create a holistic view of you. So when we think about the nitty-gritty information about grade point and academic performance, I'd like to say to students from 9th grade all the way through, GPA is just a number without a context. So how did they create the context? They create the context for what that calculation is based on looking at your transcript. So they're going to look at what courses you chose, what kind of rigor you maintained. So if you have a 3.2, for example, and a 3.2 has, just a basic curriculum versus a 3.2 with a couple of honors classes and maybe an AP versus a 3.2 with multiple APs and honors classes. The 3.2s can be perceived differently. We encourage you guys to take rigorous classes in the areas of strength and interest. Also on the transcript, they're going to look at each of the individual semesters and see, did your grade trends go up? Did you start strong and maybe then your grades went down? Does your performance fluctuate? Do you do great one semester and not great the best? Did you have one bad semester, or is there one subject, one course that you really just didn't do well in? If there's a onesie, twosie anomaly on your transcript, we can explain that either in essays or in letters of rec, but they will go into that detail in your transcript. They're also going to look at how your transcript and your GPA looks in relation to the Rochester High School profile. We calculate numbers every single year to frame for colleges and universities what an average student looks like from Rochester High. If you go to the Rochester Community Schools webpage and you go to curriculum and you go into the secondary portion, you can see all three high schools profiles right there. So they're trying to create context. It's not just a number. ACT and SAT. Colleges will say it's really the only national scale they have. So it's the only national number that they can kind of look at and see based on the average student that looks like you in the nation. Based on our metrics, do you fit in with what we know to be successful here if they use the SAT and ACT? Individual performance on the SAT and ACT will be framed by your transcript. Does your SAT or ACT score kind of match where your grades are? If they don't, let's say your score is super high, but your grades are not so great, or your grades are kind of okay, but your test score is lower. So we have to, again, give context. High school profile. Again, that average of Rochester High School student in terms of your test scores. How did you compare? There's also a great new trend that we're seeing towards test optional, and we'll cover that in the next slide, but it really can take some of the pressure off if testing has not been your strong suit. Again, the narrative context I went to in pretty good detail before, but essays, they're not required by all, but many do require them. Letters of recommendation, typically required by highly selectives and private schools. So we're looking at like a University of Michigan, Ann Arbor as an example of a public that's highly selective, and then portfolios and auditions.
So let's talk about the concept of test optional. This might be a new terminology for some of you. This is actually something that we believe is positive that's come out of the pandemic. Test optional means to colleges and to students that not all students were able to take standardized testing at all high schools. And so colleges had to kind of alter what their criteria was when looking at admittance for students. So many colleges, most actually, have looked into something called test optional. Test optional is a newer concept. Many colleges are kind of measuring the retention of students that they admit using test optional. So it's kind of like a barometer that they're not quite certain on if something's going to be staying. They're not certain on how exactly it's going to measure out long term, but it's something that we are actually pretty excited about. Test optional means that a student does not have to necessarily submit their SAT or ACT score for a college in order to consider them for admissions. As I had said, each college has different criteria versus test optional, and we assume it will be changing year to year. So you're encouraged to go directly to the college's website to get up-to-date information regarding their policies and criteria for having a student use test optional or not. What this essentially means is that a student is going to take a look at some data to help them determine their decision on if they submit their test score or not for college admissions. On the screen here, you see this is an example from Michigan State University for this school year. And we have the middle numbers, the 50th percentile of the students that are currently freshmen, the fall 2020 freshman profile entering class. There's 8,228 kids. The midline high school GPA is a 3.5 to a 4.0. Typically, you'll see a smaller range there, but that's the number we have this year. The composite ACT score and the total SAT score. So if a student has potentially a higher GPA and a lower test score for many reasons, not all of us, it's one day in the life when you actually take the SAT or the ACT. It's simply one day. It's one test. It is not all encompassing. But again, it was criteria that was used for a very long time for looking at college admittance. So if a student finds that maybe their test score tends to be a little bit lower and their GPA is a little bit higher, the family is strongly encouraged to look at each college's website. In the search bar, type in the word freshman profile and take a look at what their stats are for that. If a student's test score falls below the midline of the student's test scores, you may potentially want to consider not submitting that test score. If they fall above it or within the range, please know that your student falls within the 50th percentile. This really is a family decision. But when I talk about this with students, I like to support it through data. And this is the data that really we like to use. Taking a look at the freshman profile, where does your student fall within that mid-range? Does it make sense? Will submitting the test score help them get admitted to the college, or will it potentially hurt them? The other thing when we're taking a look at test scores really is, should I retake the test? So if we take a look at again, the freshman profile and say a student's test score was a little bit lower than what was admitted, that might be a reason to retake the test to see if it's going to help them for admissions. Now, the ultimate goal obviously is not just getting into college, but it's absolutely staying into college. So taking all of this into consideration and finding a best fit college, a good fit college of where to apply to is utmost important. The other thing to speak about when we talk about test scores is merit scholarships. Merit scholarships is something that ties into the GPA and typically, definitely in the past, a standardized test score. Colleges are really varying these merit scholarship criteria as well. So again, go to the specific college, type in merit scholarship and see what their criteria is for the year. It can change year to year. Some colleges have completely wiped out merit scholarship. Have completely wiped out the test score for some of their merit scholarships and have looked just at GPA. But you're going to find where there's some of the scholarships that have higher money attached to them, that the test score is still listed there. That is a reason to potentially retake the test to hopefully fall into a higher criteria to get a higher scholarship amount of money. It might range by $1,000 per year or more. In over 4 years, obviously that adds up to quite a bit of money. So that would be a reason to potentially retake the SAT or the ACT. Again, you're encouraged to get to the college's specific website for looking at their up-to-date information on merit scholarships, and then also using the freshman profile as a data point to make some of the decisions on what to supply for admittance into the college. Next slide, please. So part two, really our hope here, this is an effort to stay true to our mission of educating you through the process without overwhelming. So we're hopeful this didn't overwhelm you, but we understand it is a lot of information and it's quite long. But we've decided to share a part two of this presentation in the spring, when really the information needs to be a little bit fresher to you at that point. Part two will include the following: the application components, when and how to apply, with many of those bullets listed, the financial aid and scholarship things to consider, NCAA, which is for our potential students that want to play sports in college, reacting to admissions decisions, kind of what those definitions are, and finally finalizing the post-high school choice. So again, part two will be in the spring. We're going to email it directly to all junior parents with active links in the email that talk about really how to request a transcript and what those small kind of pieces are. We're going to try and keep it really manageable for you. You can click on what you need the most. We also go into the classroom again in the spring. We go now, but we go into the classroom again to really touch on the specific how-tos of junior year. We meet with the kids as seniors and touch base again about the process. We really try to help them through, but we understand that it is a lot. We're trying not to make anybody feel overwhelmed in the process. Our goal is to really help it feel manageable. Next slide, please. So junior year focus, just a quick recap. Work, we want to support our kids. You are your child's first teacher. A lot of the learning process is something that we build on every single day. So continuing to work hard in school, advocating when they need some help, figuring out how to seek that help. Things can get difficult, but it's not about getting stuck in the moment. It's about how to seek help to work through that process. We are lucky that we have our kids at home with us. Obviously throughout the process of life, we will have certain struggles and challenges. We want to really make sure that they understand how to seek support and seek help and continue to move through the process of growth, really is the main thing. Number 2, investigate, really taking a look at skills, interests, values, talents, helping your child really identify the things that makes their whole body vibrate. When I saw you doing that activity, it looked like you were really into it. Can you tell me what you enjoyed about it? Really having those conversations to help them identify the passions that they have, really looking at career options. There are career options for all. We want to make sure that we aren't, saying that one specific option is better than the other. It's not, because every single person's individual and has individual goals. We want to be sure that the message we're giving is that it's career options for all, and there are many career options. Number 3 really is the pieces of paper, the things that show how the student has progressed through really the education system that we have and the learning that we have. That includes the transcripts, test scores, essays, etc. And to wrap up, thank you for staying in there with us. Next slide, please. Really just breathe. This is a process. We are a part of your child's village. Part 2 of this series, again, will be emailed directly to you in the spring and then spoken and shared with your students as well. Always please try to keep the goal in mind, helping students grow in who they are so they can see their place and contribution to this big world, helping them see their purpose, have financial independence, and true happiness. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. By all means, always reach out to your child's counselor. We are here in the village with you.